A very warm welcome to all the attendees. Thank you for joining us in this webinar on role of communication and power of automation in creating high performance culture. I am Manali Vyas, your host today for this webinar. This session will be for 45 minutes. This webinar is conducted by Synergita. Synergita is a cloud-based performance management and analytics software which helps you focus on employee performance, employee engagement, and employee development. I would like to introduce you to the speaker for this session. The presenter for today's session is Mr. Chandru Chakrapani. He is Vice President at Annexmed Private Limited. Chandru comes with 19 years of experience in human resources. He has been associated with companies like Cairn Energy, Virtusa, SPIC Group, and LatentView Analytics. His experience of 2 decades can be summarized as worked in diverse sectors like manufacturing, oil and gas, Petrochemicals, ITES and IT. Organizations that were large MNCs, public listed companies, startups, family-run enterprises, engaging at different phases like organic growth, consolidation, pursuance of newer opportunities, downsizing. Before handing over the control to Chandru, here are a few housekeeping instructions. All phones are set to mute. If you have any questions, please type them in the chat window located beside the presentation panel. We have received several questions from the registrants which will be answered by the speaker during the Q&A session. We will continue to collect more questions during the session as we receive and will try to answer them during today's session. If we are not able to address your queries during the session, you will certainly receive answers via email shortly. Thank you for your participation and enjoy the session. Over to you, Chandru.
Happy evening to all of you. Thanks Team Synergita for giving me this opportunity. Thanks to all the participants for taking your time and being available here. Thanks Manali for that introduction. As you're aware, the topic for today's discussion is role of communication and power of automation in creating high performance culture. Let us demystify all of these things. If you look at the keywords, what are they? Performance, communication, and automation. I would like to travel with you, take a little bit of a deep dive into each of these aspects and try to understand in a holistic fashion how we can drive a high performance culture by understanding these 3 unique concepts. So what is performance? Let's begin with performance. As you all agree, organizations come into existence. They thrive, they strive, they are looking to grow to achieve a particular purpose, a vision, a mission. It is these purposes, this vision, mission that make the reason why an organization exists, the rationality at play. Now, whether an organization has an explicitly stated purpose or at times implicitly understood purpose, it could be either of that, but whichever way it is, organizations do deploy a set of resources to achieve the set purpose. What are they? In simple terms for us to understand, they are money, materials, and manpower. By materials, of course, you will agree with me, I refer to any and all kind of tools an organization deploys to achieve its set goals, objectives. Of these human resources is that particular aspect which makes use of other resources to achieve the set objectives, which makes us to believe that how well an organization performs is dependent on how well the human resources perform. Which means it is definitely not an exaggeration if I say human performance, people performance is equal to an organization's performance. And as I believe most of the participants in today's discussion come from an HR background, I think it is indeed our big responsibility to ensure that we take care of this particular process, because we own this particular process in any and most of the organizations that we work. So our role becomes that much critical. Coming back to the point, we did refer and say now that an organization's performance is impacted by the performance of groups and individuals who constitute that organization. If that is so, what is that factor, a set of factors that impact people performance? For which I would like to take a little bit of a deep dive to understand what do we mean by people? Is there a better way we can define and understand people? I thought we can categorize people in organization in 3 different ways. Those who set expectations, those who achieve expectations, and those who facilitate in achieving those expectations. An example, the organization sets for itself that it wants to expand in the US region. So the goal is set very clearly to the person who heads sales in North America that he has to expand and he also has to bring naturally additional revenue from the US region. So this guy looks into what is there right now and he figures out, I think I need to set up my shop in, let's say, East Coast, where my company or my products and services are not currently available. So he would like to see how he can grow his market over there, how he can make his presence felt, the organization's presence felt, and also bring in more revenue out of that. But for him to achieve that, he has to have the required manpower, which means he has to work with HR team to identify a person internally or to hire somebody locally. The new incumbent who has come in, that person needs to understand about what is the company all about, what is the product or the service that we provide, what is our USP, and enable them to reach out to the clients, which means you need a set of people, a group to work. It could be inside sales, it could be team members from his own sales or marketing team who equip this new incumbent in East Coast to go and sell the organization, the services, the products. And of course, you need budget. You need to work very closely with the finance team to ensure that you are able to make the right investments so that you can really look at growing the market, getting new business, by which the head of the marketing sales over there achieves his target and the organization is able to achieve its target. Let's pause for a moment. A lot of us would have gone through some kind of a communication workshop or the other at various points of our career. You might have come across this unique exercise called as Chinese whisper. In a controlled environment, what happens? You have a person A who communicates something to person B, who in turn communicates to person C. So like this, it goes on up to the 9th person, person 9. What do you hear from the 9th person? You hear something completely different from what you heard from the first person. There's a lot of distortion, there's additions, there is deletions. What started off as a square has started communicated by the person 1. When you hear from the 9th person, it is probably a circle, and worse, sometimes it's just a single dot. So in the whole concept, what happens? The intention is completely lost in communication, and therefore communication plays a very important role. So when we are talking about performance, you have a set of people who set expectations, hundreds and thousands of people who go about working to achieve those expectations, and a lot more of them who will have to facilitate. And what binds all of them? It is only communication, the all-encompassing factor. I was wondering, is this just my postulation, or is there a way I can substantiate this? I was fortunate enough to get hold of a survey conducted by the leading organization, Corporate Leadership Council. What was the survey all about? What was the end result? It was quite fascinating. They came up with 106 unique performance drivers which have a positive impact on performance. What they did, they categorized these 106 performance drivers into 4 buckets. A level performance drivers, similarly B level, C level, and D level. And what was the rationale of this division, this categorization? A level, which was the topmost, were those performance drivers which have, they found through the survey, an impact of 25% or greater positively on performance of people and therefore the organization. And now if you look into the whole thing, out of the 106 drivers, they just came up with 9 drivers which have this kind of a high impact. Because as you go from level A, which has 25% or greater positive impact, when you go to level B, C, and D, it reduces drastically. That at level D, it is just negligible impact on performance, positive impact on performance. When you look at a closer look at what these 9 drivers are, no surprises, you find 4 of them are directly related to the aspect called as communication, as you can see it on the screen. 2 of them, one way or other related, not necessarily directly, but communication plays an important role in impacting this particular aspect. And there were few other aspects as well, like risk taking and stuff like that. But in the context of our discussion right now, I think this survey very clearly highlights the fact that communication plays an important role in impacting positively or negatively, for that matter, performance of groups and individuals, which in turn impacts the company's organization's performance. Let's move on. If communication is so critical, so crucial, how do we understand it? Is there a better way that we can understand? What do we mean by communication? Is it just some workshops, some induction that we give to new joinees, or the usual roadshows that we do as part of HR function at the times of performance appraisal, the emails, the reminders? It is these things, but definitely it is much more. In fact, as an organization, as an HR organization, as an HR function, we have to understand how critical this aspect of communication. To understand it a little deeper, I will take you through different phases of a typical performance management cycle. Not taking too much of a time, we all are familiar with it, starting from planning to reviewing, developing, evaluating, and rewarding. Let's go one by one. Let's start with the aspect called as planning. How is communication impacting the planning? And what do we mean by planning? Planning is all that an organization does to achieve its objectives. I would like to give a real scenario over here. I was working with this organization, a IT setup. We had the typical, organizational structure where you had on-site delivery organization, an on-site sales team. You had a huge offshore delivery organization. The organization per se had a revenue target. But when you have a look into what the situation was, this is what it was. One, the organization had a revenue target, but that did not necessarily get carried to even the sales head. So when you add up the sales targets given to each of them, it may or may not necessarily meet the organization's target. The delivery organization said, revenue is not my responsibility. You bring orders, I will ensure I deliver properly. And when you spoke to the on-site organization, the delivery organization on-site, they said, my focus is to work closely with the client. I have to look bringing in new business by working with the sales team who are working with me. But delivery per se, I don't think is my cup of tea. It's not my responsibility. Number 3, the situation was something like when you look at the assessments, the performance expectations, most of them were qualitative in nature rather than quantitative. And number 4, you had people playing different roles in the organization. For example, you had a manager who was in charge of the offshore team of a particular client A. And then you had manager B for the same client who was at on-site playing a different role. But when it comes to the assessment criteria, all were being assessed on the same criteria. So there was not much of a variety. One size fits all was approach. And last but not the least, what it fundamentally meant was the organization unintentionally was working in silos rather than promoting collaboration. So what is it we did over here? This is where I'm going to interpret the word communication in 2 aspects. One, communication as an HR function, when you try to work with the leadership on the one end, the heads of different functions, managers at different locations, and bring them all together to look at things in a different manner, such that there is a lot of alignment that happens in the organization. So bringing up of minds, getting the minds together, communication plays an important role. And number two, that communication, if it is just understood at the mind level, at a vision level, is not sufficient. It has to get articulated in your actual performance assessment program. So it clearly articulates that yes, organization's intent is indeed reflected in the way the organization gives target, reviews its targets, and kind of sets goals and objectives for its people. So what is it we did? First, we agreed what we wanted to achieve in terms of performance expectations. So we came up with a set of different aspects: the revenue targets, the bottom line. Number two, it could be, we came up with how many clients we should be able to add in that financial year, new clients, and what is the kind of newer domains we should probably get into, a lot of aspects. Number two, we were ensuring that all of these, to the extent possible, is percolated to the different roles that people play in the organization. How much ever we could do. In this particular example, actually we rolled it up to the level of assistant managers. And then if you see the second aspect that we did, who should achieve? Primary owners, secondary owners, we clearly identified. So earlier, if you see, the delivery organization was saying revenue is not my responsibility. We said we understand, but you also should own up a little bit of revenue by ensuring the current revenue, there is no slippage, there is no drop. Number two, you try to work with the existing client to see how you can penetrate the current organization, the current client or the project you are involved in, to bring in more revenue. And similarly, when we were working on delivery, we were telling what could be the enhanced role of on-site delivery folks in ensuring that we provide quality deliverables, timely deliverables to the client. So enough weightage was given to people. So we were telling people that you are not silos, but there is an amount of complement that has to happen between your goals. How well is it achieved? So the next aspect that we moved on, as I told you earlier, it was full of qualitative. We moved on to quantitative aspects. So we were clearly saying, so how many clients will you be able to bring in? How many top talent will you nurture in a particular 6 months period or 1 year period? How many such talent will you be able to churn out of your organization, your team, so that they can grow and get themselves enriched in terms of their particular career? A lot of those things came into picture, apart from the fact usual suspects like utilization, talk about pyramid, on-site offshore ratio. A lot of those things were starting to get captured. And then, more importantly, you also started looking at a shared vision. So even in the examples that I gave, utilization, or for that matter, you are looking at something like what is the project cost? Is it viable for us? Resource management team, the finance teams will have to provide a lot of data so that they can be validated when a particular group or individual claims that they have achieved it. So these things will have to be set as targets even for the support functions. So in this entire aspect called as planning, if you see from where we were, we moved into something else different by number one, first setting up this communication by having your usual phone calls, video calls, whatever with people, with group of people, identifying task forces, bringing all of them at one level where there is a mind share. And number two, you implement that, you ensure that gets reflected in your actual performance assessment process. So that is the importance that communication plays in the planning phase. Let's move on to reviewing. This is a very critical aspect. Impact of communication in reviewing. How I wish whatever we do in our organizations, when you set in the beginning of the year, is similar to a 100-meter dash. So you are at the start point, you are able to visibly see your end point, and all that is there between your start point and end point is your simple human potential. Unfortunately, as most of us will agree, that a corporate life, even a year, is not a 100-meter dash, but it is probably a marathon. What do you do in marathon? You know that you have to achieve your 22 kilometers, your 42 kilometers, whatever it is. You also know what is the best time that you have been able to do. You want to better your best, and some of us, we want to better and become the best of all. You have all of those measurements. You have past experience. You have the previous year's performance as a team, as an individual, as an organization. You have played, you have participated in a marathon elsewhere, but this marathon is a unique. This territory is something different, and you do not know what surprises you will get as you keep going in that direction. So when I'm talking about reviewing, it is not just about reviewing of performance of groups or individuals, but even before that, objectives. The objectives that you set in the beginning of the year need not necessarily be the same throughout. They dynamically change. And as we all know, we live in a VUCA world. Honestly speaking, this VUCA stuff is there always. But then we found a new coinage, and that has become a bit fashionable. I'll just give you a simple example in terms of volatility. I was part of this organization, the HR team. We had a mandate of having to hire around 60 people in a short span of time because we had signed up a huge contract, a long-term contract with one of the globally reputed financial organization. It was a niche product for us, and we had to hire a large set of people, which was actually adding to around additionally 30 to 40% of our headcount. With a lean HR team, we were running in all directions to ensure we were meeting the numbers. We were short in terms of time because the client wanted us to start ASAP. We had to hire people, we had to train people in the domain, in technology. Some of them were freshers, and they needed additional coaching from our end. As we were doing all of these things, we realized as we were getting closer to the target date that we were meeting only 3/4. There was tremendous pressure for us from the on-site folks, from the delivery organization, and the leadership team was really doing all its best, motivating us and giving us hits here and there to ensure we reach the numbers. And then came 9/11. Our client came crashing down in the Twin Towers, and so also the project which we had signed off. An organization which was getting built slowly, suddenly had 30 to 40% of its people without having to bring revenue. What we were talking about is growth, and all our focus was around getting those things happen. Overnight, you saw, we were now seeing how to manage this catastrophe. The recruitment team had to stop all the people whom it has called for. The HR team had to really look at how do I engage these people. You had bigger problems for the sales team seeing where do I go and bring new business so that I can answer to my leadership team. Finance was really under tremendous pressure. Where am I going to get the money to pay salaries for all these people? And on top of all these things, you have a set of objectives that you set in the beginning of the year, and that is completely changed topsy-turvy. The whole mindset will have to change. And what role you as an organization, as an HR function do by sitting with the leaders of the organization, it plays a very critical role. And I'm sure each one of you have hundreds of such examples to look into, either the volatility or uncertainty, complexity, or the ambiguity that we go through day in and day out. So that becomes the first aspect. How as an organization you are able to communicate the changing priorities in a way that people do not get frustrated, they understand the changing realities. And of course comes the next part, which is reviewing the performance on an ongoing basis of groups and individuals. As we all know, as we move forward, we are going to work more and more with millennial workforce. So what are the challenges? It's not a challenge, that is a reality in fact. So this set of people, when you are talking about review, they want instant feedback. They want constant feedback. They want it to be told informally. They do not want to sit with you in a formal meeting every now and then. And they want all of this information to be made available so they can use it at a later point in time. And I'm very sure you see a lot of people who within 6 months or 1 year say, hey, I have mastered myself in this, give me some new responsibilities, I'm getting bored. So if this is the mindset of the people with whom you're working, look at the larger complexity of the environment in which you work. So you have something like people change projects, managers change teams, you have roles changing, you have new technologies and skills which are coming into picture, and they make what you are doing right now outdated. We have had discussions when a client told, we are happy with whatever you guys are delivering, but can you move into a different technology and provide the same service? It looks so simple on paper, but if we have to do that, We were not having the right kind of people with the latest technology who were experts in that. But the client was very simple, saying we did a research and we find that what you give us an output in 24 hours, you can get this particular output and a much better presentation of data to us in 12 hours time. So we would like you to explore that, and we cannot say no. We have to see how quickly we can work on all of these things. So there's so much of dynamism that is happening, and you have that strong human element present in all of these aspects. And then you have the increased workload, you have attrition. All of these are realities that we have to face, and we have to see how your whole communication takes care of all of these dynamics. See, HR cannot keep organizing workshops. It cannot go on addressing people every now and then. It's neither possible, nor is it feasible, nor is suggested. But you have to have an environment where your managers are facilitated to do that communication. They are coached. So we will discuss a lot as we get deeper into the whole thing, but there is an amount of communication framework that is required. And I will move on to the next aspect, developing. Developing of what? I'm not necessarily talking about developing of people, because the development of people is dependent on something else more fundamental, which is development of your HR infrastructure. And what do we mean by development of the HR infrastructure? And in fact, in my personal opinion, in fact, if I have to look back at my own career, I would say places where we struggle a lot is where, as HR organization, are we able to develop programs? I'm going to interpret the word communication. Give me that license. Give me that freedom to say communication over here. What I mean is the various programs that you have in your HR organization that you come up with, do they communicate with each other? And all of them, do they in a way directly or indirectly impact positively the performance of the people, groups, and the organization eventually? So communication at one level is all of these programs. I'll give you an example. The organization proclaims we recognize talent. But when you look at the promotion guidelines, the promotion policy, number one, it says I will give importance to tenure. It says, yeah, I do recognize talent, but then between a top performer and a slow performer and a poor performer, I'm not going to make much of a difference in terms of promoting them to the next level or giving them opportunities. So you have a statement, it looks very good on your presentations, in your PPTs, in your corporate discussions, but then in reality, you find that you are not recognizing talent. Number two, let us say the organization says, if you are a top performer, you have the freedom to choose your career path. But then when the employee actually goes, he has proven himself and he wants to explore a new territory within the organization, there are so many hurdles. And there's no clarity. Number one, hurdle, and number two, clarity, lack of clarity of how I can change. So what typically happens is you are not providing the right kind of information to people. You are not having the right HR infrastructure to develop people. And there is no proper communication happening. I'm reminded of a big e-commerce giant. My friend is working there. I was having a discussion with him. So he said when they have to promote people from individual contribution role to a role where they will also have people responsibility, they are not handed over immediately. They are given a 6 months period where they have a definite goal, saying a development goal. In this example that I'm giving, when they want to develop themselves as people, they play the role of a people manager down the line. As part of the development goals, they have to manage 2 or 3 scenarios. The scenarios could be, for example, how do you manage well a person who is already a top performer? You as an individual, how have you enabled the team member to further develop his skills, take care of his aspirations, ensure that he is really motivated? This incumbent also will have to see how he manages a poor performer, an identified poor performer, either in terms of coaching or identifying different areas where he can otherwise perform, or moving the employee out of that particular team, project, or if required, out of the organization, because that is the best thing to happen for the individual as far as for the organization is concerned. Now, even before you promote a good performer in the current role to the next role, the organization has created a very good setup through which you test the employee, the person who has the potential to go to the next level. So what happens in reality, when you promote that guy, you are promoting him for success and not for failure. In this organization, you are really talking about a program which actually executes what you say is purely people development. So that is one aspect of HR programs I'm talking about. How well are they connected with each other so that you really help developing employees? The next aspect is about effective communication. An important aspect is, as you know, people come, people go, they have 101 priorities. And on top of that, they have to understand a lot of things that are already available in the system. The first part I spoke, non-availability of, good programs. Number two, you might have good programs, but how are you presenting it to people? So how are you reaching out to people? Is there awareness in people? Is there an accessibility of information? Or is it all stored in some rigid drives in HR systems? Or is it available openly for people for them to look at? So that becomes an important point. Just an example, we were very enthused. We came up at the end of 6 months for a batch of freshers, a program called as Winning Competencies at Work. It was a well-researched program, and we took help from a lot of people, and we delivered a one-day workshop. It's not a typical lecturing stuff. We had a lot of demonstrations, various best techniques of training happened over there, and all the people were very happy about attending the program. Remember, all of these were people, freshers out of various engineering campuses, 6 months into the system. The feedback was unanimous that this program was very helpful. They understood what they are required to do. But you know what? The topmost feedback was not that. The topmost feedback was, what were you guys doing for the last 6 months? Why couldn't you do this program even as I stepped into project teams within 2 months or 3 months? To that extent, I would have probably given much more focus. I at least know what is expected. So basically what happens is, when you talk about developing people, communicating, it is to ensure that these interventions are happening at the right point in time. And that has an impact on developing people per se. And then let's move on to the next phase, which is evaluating. What do we evaluate? We evaluate the performance based on agreed standards. An important aspect over here, if you see, is in terms of evaluation. In fact, you can go and have a honest conversation with most of your experienced people, and they will tell you, honestly, I don't know how to fill in my self-assessment forms. They say, anyway, my manager has something in his mind already. That is what he's going to give. Why should I write? And there are some people who genuinely need that help. But how well you have in your system a methodology through which you can empower such people. I'm just taking this as an example. I remember I was working for this Petrochemicals organization. We went to our site and we were discussing with people wherein we have implemented a new performance assessment system. I was talking to the supervisor in the electrical department, and he said, sir, I have a big problem. I can't write in English. And then he said, sir, I do a lot of good work, but I don't know how to record them. And I'm worried my manager, who has got around 10 people under him, whether he will remember whatever I did. So what we did, I immediately took the help of the plant head HR and the rest of my team members in HR team over there. We said, made some changes. We said, you can write in any language as long as it is English or Tamil. And number two, we gave those people an immediate workshop. We had kiosks set up by the HR team where people were ready to support. HR people were ready to help those of them who wanted a better way in ways they can write their appraisal forms. So how well as an organization you support your employees, you coach them, what should they look for, makes a big impact. And importantly, giving feedback. We know, a lot of us, we know all of this stuff. It should be fact-based, data-driven, less subjective, more objective, and all of those things. That is there always. But more importantly, have you observed, as we go on now, the age difference between the managers in many organizations, I find, even in manufacturing setup, the age difference between the manager and the people whom they manage is coming down drastically, which means they all are on the same level in terms of the stage of life. Their maturity, their experiences are almost the same. See, whatever said and done, there is a difference between a raw fruit and a ripe fruit. And what is that will make a raw fruit a ripe fruit? It is only time. Nothing else can make that change. So when you are looking at such managers, in fact, I have personal experience of having hired managers from top-notch management institutes in the country, and then you see those people wanting in how to manage their people. It is not they are incapable, they just don't have that experience, they don't have that exposure, because of which they lack the confidence. So how, as an organization, an HR organization, are you able to provide platforms, provide processes? So when I say communication over here, it is not about telling people, it is not about HR addressing a group of managers and say, these are some of the good practices in giving feedback that they all know. They're smarter than most of us. But do you have an organizational culture where seamlessly the managers and the employees can talk? Where there's a culture that you can represent your grievances, that you can take up our issues in a way that it will be understood and addressed. And there are times, generally when we talk about grievances, we think it is only about an employee feeling grievance about manager being biased. I have seen places where the manager finds that the employees are absolutely aggressive, over-expecting. How do you manage those kind of scenarios? So how well you have mechanisms within the organization to ensure this evaluation happens in a good manner also has an impact on performance of people. Rewarding, the most crucial aspect, is nothing but recognition. I remember reading in a report that 65 to 70% of the time, employees' perspective changes. They believe that there has been fairness, transparency, and etc. in the rewards that they got if managers communicate the rewards that has been given to the employees in a very good manner. If managers are able to communicate in a rational way that performance, that reward, then employees' perception about that particular reward, that it has been fair and transparent, equal, and there is a lot of parity, there's a difference of around 65 to 70%. But how will you make that happen? Because as you all will agree, the rewards are always, there are limits. I can give only so much of money as incentive to people, distributed amongst a set of people. There are only so many promotions I can do. There are only so many newer opportunities I can provide to people. Not everybody can be given. Even assuming for a minute all of them are good performers, top performers. So one way or the other, you have to bring in some amount of rationality into what you do. So number one, as an organization, you talk about saying we are an organization with fairness, transparency, etc., which is the communication part. But then, is it supported by, is it acknowledged by the programs that you have? Do the programs communicate what you are actually saying is your reward mechanism? I remember this classic example. I had this employee, he came to all of us on the floor, distributed sweets. Why? He got phenomenal increment which he did not expect. His manager 15 minutes back, half an hour back, gave him the increment letter and told him, you brought in so much of revenue, you opened new territories and new regions, and this 1 year has been phenomenal from your end. You have been the topmost performer, and I want to thank you personally, this letter and all of those things. So he was just sharing that happiness, coming and giving sweets to us. 15 minutes down the line, the same guy came and told us, this company is absolutely nonsense. He said, there is no parity, there is injustice. If you guys are not going to take care of me, I'm not going to leave it like this. I'm going to escalate it to senior leadership. What is that happened in the 15 minutes? After distributing the sweets to everyone, he went and sat in his table just to realize, in quantitative terms, somebody who has not performed like him had got the same increment what he got. I know we all tell in HR that increments are confidential, you don't discuss, but that is always more in paper than in reality. So let's face the reality. What happened over here? It is true that this particular person who distributed sweets was indeed a top performer, but you demotivated him because the rewards, the action that you as an organization gave was not the same for people. He was completely demotivated. So what you do as an organization in terms of how you communicate, some of these aspects play a very critical role. And how do you manage performance? I was talking to you about development aspects. So you have people in different performance categories, top performance, consistent and poor performance. Do you have systems through which you can take care of all of these people? And that is when you are communicating in reality in your organization to people that depending on your performance, that programs are available for you to ensure that you are successful and support the organization. So that is how you see the impact of communication in different phases of performance assessment. And moving to the last part, which is how can automation power this communication? All of these things happen in organizations, but when you can back it up with automation, you are now talking completely a different environment in which you are propelling the performance of individuals and organizations. Not too much of a difficult thing. I am showing some of those points over here for us to discuss. The common advantages you have are multiple geographies. Artificial boundaries can be completely broken when you have automation. Instant communication can happen. The dynamics that we spoke that exist in today's organization, matrix reporting, multiple managers during the same assessment period for the same employee, and frequent changes in roles and responsibilities, a lot of these can be handled very well if you have automation. And if you are looking at various subsystems to provide information about an employee's performance, attendance, utilization, identified a skill gap for an employee, you gave a target in terms of learning, did the person complete the training program? Now when you do an assessment in terms of competency, is there an increase? Do you have online assessment tests? Disciplinary actions? A lot of this information, if they are captured in an automated environment, made available, you make it much easier for the employee. You empower the employee and importantly the manager as well in having better conversations, in managing performance better. Process adherence. You know, we all run behind people telling complete your appraisals, the due date is there, I have not received your appraisal form and all those things. You simply automate the whole thing and you tell people, if you do not complete your self-assessment by this date, automatically it is logged off. You cannot give any rating. So your manager and HR will decide what should be your rating. That's quite possible. You're kind of bringing a discipline within the organization because you can't go endlessly in a critical process. I remember a friend of mine who was looking very sad. I asked him what happened. He said, in my organization, for the last quarter, I did not get my performance incentive. I asked him why. Oh no, my performance was good, but still they didn't get. I said, again, why? He said, no, I checked with HR. They said, you nominated yourself for a training program last quarter. And I said, yes. Did you take up that program? I said, no. And that is why we have not given you a performance incentive. He said, I was shocked. The reason was very clear. The HR department said, see, we nominated you. There was a certain amount of fees that was paid by the organization. You did not participate. The amount is forfeited. We cannot get that money back. Now you have to pay the penalty. What happens basically is, sorry, I'm giving some negative examples, but the point I'm trying to tell you is when you automate some of these aspects, those critical aspects become very important, support you in bringing in a lot of discipline and more focus. For that matter, if you're looking at the top leadership, wanting to know who are my top performers in terms of various slices and dice, in slices and dices, it could be in terms of function, department, region, it could be in terms of technology, a lot of these things in terms of years of experience, or people coming from a particular college. You want to see how is that college, students from that particular institution are doing. A lot of this information can be easily got if you have a system through which you automate these things. Very quickly, how does automation impact the stage of planning? As we said, the important aspect in planning is cascading the goals that can seamlessly happen in an automated environment. Number two, as a manager, if the priorities will have to be set in and you want to tell your reporting, this is what I want you to give as a priority. Not campus recruitment, but lateral hires with this kind of experience for this particular business unit. You can set that as a priority to your placement, your recruitment head, and he automatically will take that as his priority. So we have different stakeholders and they can be assigned different weightages automatically. So you are saying that you have to have an effluent treatment plant set in the organization because the pollution control board has said, if in 6 months time you don't have an ETP in your factory, I'm going to close down the factory. And a lot of people have to work on that. It is not the responsibility of just the safety department. You have the production department. You have people from engineering department. You have to work with the liaison officers. You have to work with the local community. A lot of things will have to happen. And if this particular goal has to be done, it cannot be done just by the head of safety. And you have to distribute this responsibility to everyone, so everybody takes equal role and ensure that particular goal, which is very critical to the organization, is achieved. It doesn't get sidelined. And the goals that you said are hard-coded. They are easily accessible and reviewed by people, or accessed by people at any point in time. And I'm moving on to the next phase, which is about reviewing objectives. As I said, in changing environment, if you want to change the goals, you can do that by basically setting it up in the system automatically. Communication goes to employees. And if you want to review not the performance of just your immediate reporting, but you also want to see how second level is doing in an automated environment, you can see how those people are performing. As a senior manager, you are able to review them, performance, or your team leads, for example. And then we spoke a lot about giving feedback and all of those things. In an automated environment, it makes things much easier and quicker to happen, and you are able to record all of those things. When it comes to developing, as we said, each of your subsystems in the HR ecosystem, if they can be worked out very well, they are able to capture all the information that you want. You are able to seamlessly put things in place. So you want to recommend a particular employee for a particular training program. You can do it through online, which is linked to whether you have completed the program or not at the end of the performance period. Not rocket science. Your competency levels, you want to measure, you want to map, you want to evaluate after some point in time, you want to give a feedback. If all of them can be done automatically, then that becomes much more easier. You want to move people to different roles. You want to identify new competencies for them where they can be successful. You are setting expectations for them. Like the typical example I gave you about the e-commerce giant, you can do all of that very well. And automation empowers that you much faster. And in terms of evaluation, as we said, when you have the ability to record on and off all the points as an incident diary, not just in your memory, you are doing away with a lot of subjectivity that happens. And if there are escalations that are there, disagreements that are there, an employee, if he wants to reach out to the HR team directly saying, I'm not happy with the ratings, by a click of a button, if he can reach HR, you are doing away with a lot of usual protocols that will have to otherwise come into place in a typical organizational environment. It brings a lot of dynamics and unhappiness, unhealthy discussions. So if the whole thing can be automated, you have a much professional way in ways you can handle these difficult situations. And in rewarding, in fact, the most critical part, very quickly, just to say how automation can help us. You see a lot of times you want to arrive at eligibility lists. You are looking at some calculation errors. For example, somebody was on loss of pay. So when you're paying incentives to them, they are not supposed to get that money. But in your Excel sheet, you will not capture. But if it is automated, attendance is automated, it captures automatically. So your headache is gone by that level. Whether you are looking at any monetary and non-monetary rewards for future use, when they are captured, it helps you a lot. Then you have recognition for people that can be done publicly, or if you want to reprimand and you want to send a stinker to one of the employees or a reminder to somebody, you can do in a private mode without the person having to be told in front of a lot of people. Escalations can happen to skip level managers, and you can also have outsiders acknowledging performance by a team member. The entire reward mechanism, if you see, or if you want to identify people for opportunities, if you want to nominate people for different programs, and you are looking at, let us say, you are making a proposal for an airline industry, and you do not have experience as such in an airline industry, you go into your system and you try to figure out, are there any employees who have a prior experience in airline industry? You are able to pick those people. He is a superior performer. You want him to work on a very challenging POC, so you give an opportunity for him. So there are multiple ways in which you can primarily look at how automation helps people. To summarize the whole thing, my dear friends, organization performance is what we see in the front. But what follows organization performance, what enables that to happen, is the group or the individual performance. This group or the individual performance, as we discussed, as we saw, is very highly impacted how well communication is handled in the organization. And in the context of what we are discussing about performance management, we looked at what are some of the ways in which communication can be understood, interpreted, and implemented in our organizations. And if this communication can be powered with automation, the various challenges that we face in terms of organizations today, whether in terms of the VUCA or whether in terms of the different geographies from where people work, different diverse backgrounds from where people come in, a lot of them can be handled successfully if we are able to power it with automation. So I do believe that automation plays a vital role in impacting communication, which in turn impacts individual performance, group performance, and thus enable us all achieve a high performance culture in the organization, ensuring the organization achieves all its desired goals. I hope I have done justice to the topic, my dear friends. I thank you all for your patient listening. Over to Manali.
Well, thank you, Chandru, for sharing your experience with us. Now, we have few questions with us which are posed by the attendees. We will pose these questions to Chandru now. Here is the first question, Chandru. Can you share some of your experiences in setting up an effective communication channel in a large organization, how that can be achieved?
Okay. See, one of the things that I recollect is this organization where we had to implement a new MBO system, management by objectives. We were moving away from, again, a qualitative kind of arrangement to quantitative, predominantly quantitative way of measuring things. But was it an easy jump for us? Not really. As an organization, we had a lot of challenges. Number one, the infrastructure was not ready for us. So we had to address that. Number two, we had another important challenge that when you are making changes to the tool which is going to assess people, we were worried whether this new tool will give the performance levels of people differently than what it should reflect. So for example, a manager feels based on some criteria, this employee is going to be a superior performer. Let's say 4 in a scale of 5. 5 being the highest, the next level being 4. But if I implement the new tool, will the person suddenly become a 3 or worse a 2, which are inferior performance? A lot of these doubts existed at different levels of the organization. So what we did, we took the sample size of people, we took the past appraisal forms that these people filled in, we made them do the same assessment under the new communication, the new assessment tool, and we showcased this difference to people. And we found that there were certain places where there were marginally some errors, but overall it was not impacting how you view the performance of people. What we did, we took what you call as a dry run of the new tool to different levels of management, and we told them we believe that we can indeed confidently go ahead and implement it. It took us additional work. It took us the support of few people who are willing to volunteer and do the work for our own sake. But by having this particular exercise done, whether it was a leadership team in the particular location, the managers, or the group of employees, we told them, we give you the confidence that this will not drastically impact the way things are happening. And there were certain loopholes. In fact, one of the points I want to say is, we also showed them areas which are red flags. We told them, we are saying that we will look into some of these metrics that will be used. But we agreed, or we openly told them, we are not ready with those metrics. We said, this particular 6-month cycle, this particular metrics, this is how we are going to do it to ensure it does not impact anybody positively or negatively. That particular criteria is neutralized for all in the organization. So this, I believe, gave confidence to people over a period of time, we were able to implement it successfully.
Great. Thank you, Chandru. Here's another question. What is the one thing that fast-growing startups do right in terms of creating a high-performance culture?
The first one is willingness to work in ambiguity. Number two, don't look to set rules, but provide guidelines to people. And number three, are you able to work in chaos? Be a leader, a thought leader, but more importantly, execution leader. In fact, in my own examples I have seen, my personal experiences, if your execution is not matching the speed with which you can think or you can come up with creative ideas, you are losing. So I think these are the four aspects that employees, HR function should support vigorously their startups.
Okay, here's another one. What are the challenges in developing a continuous communication model?
See, the first challenge is we all come from a need-based approach. We are reactive in whatever we do, right? When you face a problem, you want to do something. But we do not look to keep improvising what we do. And I think that mindset is the biggest challenge in having frequent communication. Of course, there are a lot of reasons. It's not that we are sitting idle in your desktops and watching some YouTube or something. Other priorities take predominance. So one way that you can improve this communication is, this entire exercise is, how do you institutionalize this? And one way I believe that we as an organization can do is, see, HR cannot be everywhere, but you can make people managers who are responsible for people in their respective units. And this communication, if you can give them the freedom, if the culture of the organization gives them the freedom to tailor it, but with support of HR, and implement those programs as important, as vitally as possible, then you are ensuring that in this aspect called as communication, you are working with the delivery teams in ensuring constant communication happens. We had a particular delivery unit where a lot of clients were getting added every now and then. And a lot of people wanted to move from the established clients with whom they were working to the new clients because they were working on new domains, new technologies and stuff like that. We had to come up with a communication mechanism which was completely run by the managers, the project managers of this particular delivery unit. HR and the delivery head, we provided only the thought level support to them. But they came up with a communication mechanism and said, hey, if you want to move to a new project, then you have to complete these technologies. You have to clear these exams. And we will help you reach out over there. So this kind of a aspiration to communicate to people our expectations ensured that people were not disheartened when they did not get an opportunity. Or those who got an opportunity, they knew what they are required to do. If HR alone had to drive this, it would have failed. But we partnered very closely with the project managers in ensuring that the communication happened very clearly in terms of setting expectations, what you need to do if you want to get into newer projects.
Okay, great, Chandru. One of our attendee wants to know any recommendation from your side on tool for this continuous communication.
I really do not think there's a particular tool, but I do know there are a lot of, what you mean, performance management systems themselves provide that. Then you have few aspects like, I think in LatentView where I was, we followed a particular this thing. You can use some of those tools. I'm not able to recollect any one quickly.
Okay, no issue, Chandru. One question is, how do we ensure employees take up the appraisals voluntarily rather than HR pushing for completion? Is there any pull strategy that is effective in smooth completion of appraisals?
I think this is a universal problem. Okay. If I see a value in something that I do, I don't need anybody to push me. As an organization, through this exercise, are you adding value to your employees? If you can be clear about that, then you don't need to push people. Number two, in this today's world, how simple can you make the entire assessment process? And number 3, as I told you earlier, make it an automated stuff. So people are not at liberty that they can take their own time. They are pushed to do things. If these things can be done, I think we can make people voluntarily take up all of these aspects. But a support is required from the overall leadership, the managers who believe in the system and who are able to actually add value to employees, that they will get to learn something, do something differently at the end of this particular exercise.
Okay. Thank you, Chandru. Still, there are so many questions coming, but since we are running out of time, so I think we'll have to wind up this session. Thank you all for attending the session. Hope you all had a good and informative session. And if you have some other questions also, please feel free to send the email at info@synergita.com. And we will send all the answers along with your queries to your email IDs. And also we'll send the recorded version of this webinar to all of you. Once again, thank you all for attending this session, and thank you, Chandru, for sharing your experience.
Thank you, Team Synergita, for this opportunity. Thanks to all the participants for being able to listen to this conversation. I hope you found that useful. Thanks to all of you. All the best to all of you in all that you do in life.